Today we are talking about aggressive sheep and goats. That's right. If you got a mean buck or if you've got a mean ram, you are definitely going to want to watch this. It's Tim from Lanessa Farm. So today we're talking about aggressive bucks and aggressive rams. And here we have our good friend Bill. Bill is a dappled boar buck. And he is not mean at all, actually. He's rather docile, but I'll tell you what, every once in a while during the year, Bill gets a little rowdy, and when it comes to rowdy, you don't want to deal with this guy. He's high 200s, he's got these humongous horns, and he can be aggressive. So, how do we deal with that? Well, gosh, you're not going to like this very much, but I'll tell you what, if you have an aggressive sheep or an aggressive goat around your farm, the best thing you can probably do is go take a long, hard look in the mirror, because chances are you are the reason that you have an aggressive sheep or goat around your farm. And why is that? Well, that's because people treat these animals like their dogs or like their cats or any other pet, and that is not a good way to deal with them. That is not the way it works. As a matter of fact, the more you handle these guys, the worse they tend to get. So, as a matter of fact, right now, he is starting to get a little rowdy. You can see just from me standing here, see how he's coming up to me and starting to butt his head. So I am going to get out of here because it's not safe. Today we're talking about aggressive rams and aggressive bucks. Now, this is something that anyone that's raising males on their farm, intact males, is going to deal with. And the reality of that is it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that should be expected. But there's some very specific things that you should do to deal with this specifically, and some very specific things that you should not do when it comes to dealing with this. But at the end of the day, we're going to expect males to be aggressive. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Aggression can be a good signal that the males are going to be a little bit more aggressive with breeding as well. But when it comes to handling males on your farm, I want you to be extremely cautious. This is very, very interesting, and there's a lot of confusion around this. The main reason is when the babies are young, when you have young male ram lambs, when you have young male bucklings, they tend to be the more outgoing of the group. They tend to be a lot more sociable. They tend to be a lot more playful, and this makes us want to play with them more. It makes us want to spend more time with them and do more things with them. But the danger of that is the more you handle your males, the more aggressive they are going to be. This is just a natural fact. This is a natural instinctive thing that they go through. So the first thing that I want you to consider is do not overhandle your males. Males should be treated completely different than females from an early age. I'm not telling you not to socialize your animals. I'm not telling you to never handle them at all. But what I'm telling you is don't play with them. Definitely don't pet them. I don't want you putting your hands on them unless you absolutely have to. And always treat them as the dangerous animals that they are. Some animals you can get away with it 100 times. To where you go in there and you're with them and nothing bad happens, but that one time they're going to get you. 2 steps away from you, a ram or a buck can take you down. They are extremely powerful animals. They're going to hit you at mid-thigh or your knee. You're going to go down and you're going to pay for it. Petting the heads of bucks or rams is a sign of aggression. If a buck or a ram comes up and starts rubbing their head up against you, you may think, oh, this is a sign of them, want me to pet them or something like that. No, it's not. It's a sign of aggression, and it's a sign that they're being aggressive towards you, and they're trying to establish dominance over you. So as you saw from the video when we had Bill in there, our dappled boar buck, you see that he's in there alone. He has a female that's in there with him. They live in there together. They're completely happy. Bill comes out when he needs to for breeding, but other than that, he's alone. He stays alone, and that's the way it goes. So When I say alone, what I actually mean is they're going to be by themselves with one other animal. Now, this can be another male, this can be a wether, this can be a female. I find that females generally are the best for them to cohabitate with. It keeps them calm, and it keeps them sane, and you're not going to have a lot of issues with them. Males, you're pushing it. There are ways to get around that, but for all intents and purposes, pen them up alone, pen them up with a female. I know that this doesn't work for everybody. This is not reality for a lot of people for a few different reasons. And so that brings us to point number 2, and that is showing intact ram lambs or showing intact boar bucks. This is a recipe for disaster. Unless you're really, really in tune with what you're doing and you've been showing animals for a while, I don't ever recommend that you show intact male rams or bucks. And the reason for that is it kind of goes against what we just talked about. You'll recall what I just said was you don't want to handle them any more than necessary. You don't want to pet their heads. You don't want to pet them. You don't want to handle them at all. You don't want to be around them. They do their thing. You do your thing. When you're teaching an animal to show, you're going to have to teach them how to lead. You're going to have to teach them how to brace. Lots and lots of things that go into this where you're handling the animal and you're handling them over and over. And what you'll find is the more you handle them, the more aggressive they become. The more aggressive they become, the harder they are to handle. And it just feeds itself. So unless you're really, really in tune with what's going on, you have a lot of experience with showing animals, I want you to understand that showing intact rams or bucks is a really, really bad idea. Now in 4-H, you're not going to run across this very often where this is even a thing that you can do. But in open class shows or exhibition shows, most definitely showing intact animals is definitely a thing that you can do. So avoid that at all costs, because essentially what you're going to end up with is you're going to end up with a really aggressive animal. Now, we've seen this before. A lot of our animals that we're going to keep for breeding purposes, we showed as juveniles. We have our Southdown ram was shown as a juvenile, and he got mean. Now, as he's been away from us handling him for a few years now, he's calmed down considerably, but for a long period of time, he was very, very mean. He was very, very aggressive. And that was my fault. That was my fault because, it was the nature of the beast. We handled him for show, and it caused a lot of problems. The third thing that you really need to consider when it comes to your males and their level of aggression is, do you really need a male on your farm? Is this really something that you need to deal with? And for a lot of you, that answer is no. And let me explain to you why that is. First of all, we have to think about inbreeding and line breeding. Inbreeding and line breeding is, inbreeding you don't want to do. Line breeding, I'm not a fan of, and we can get into that in a later video, but what I'm talking about essentially is inbreeding. Now, if you follow any of our other videos and you pay attention to what we talked about the benefit of breeding your animals, culling and getting rid of some animals and getting some new ones in. Or maybe your ewes have babies or your does have babies, and you find that they're superior to the mother, and you want to keep them instead. If you only have a few ewes or if you only have a few does, and you go out and spend a lot of money on a buck or a ram, average price of a buck or a ram in the United States, average commercial price for something that's not garbage is going to be $600 and up. And that's just a fact. That's what it costs. So do you really want to drop $600 on an animal that you're only going to breed for one season, and then you're not going to be able to breed him again for fear of inbreeding, or you're going to have to buy something else? The answer to that's probably no. When you crunch the numbers and you see how much it's going to cost for the animal himself, how much it's going to cost to house him and feed him and go through the consequences of having him, does it outweigh the benefit? And the answer is usually no. The answer to that is twofold. Two things for you to consider. One is not as good as the other, and I'll tell you why. The consideration that you should make is either leasing a ram from someone, that is, bring in a ram or a buck from someone, use it, and then give it back to the owner. Just get them pregnant and get rid of them, or take your does or your ewes somewhere and have them bred and then brought back to you. The danger with that is the communicable diseases that the sheep and goats carry.
You have to be really cautious of that. You can introduce things like CL, sore mouth, hoof rot, all kinds of problems, all the things you work really hard to prevent from getting on your farm. You can easily introduce to your farm if you are cavalier about the way that you handle your animals. The other thing to consider, and what I think is the better option, is artificial insemination. Most large veterinary institutions will handle artificial insemination for you. It's relatively inexpensive when you consider what all goes into it. I know our friends at Stock Vets here near Rensselaer, Indiana, Dr. Rumsey, Dr. Hagee, and some of the other veterinarians that are Dr. Dixon that are located at that office are very well in tune with doing artificial insemination. They have very high success rates. So I can take my ewes or my does into them, get artificially inseminated with semen from an animal that there's no way I could afford on my own, and I have the livestock, the offspring from them, and then I don't have to worry about line breeding or inbreeding. A couple side notes, things that you would want to consider when it comes to raising and keeping rams and bucks on your property is property damage. If they go into rut, and if you have some ewes or some does that are in heat, they are well known for damaging property. They will beat down fences. They will do whatever it is that they need to do to get those females. The other thing you have to worry about is the aggression between the males as well. Males establish dominance, as we talked about in the beginning of this video, by butting heads and hitting one another about the head. And if you're not cautious and you get them too near one another, they can beat each other to death, or you can have severe and permanent damage done to one of the animals. A high tensile fence or any kind of fence, essentially just separating them through 1 degree, that is to say you simply just have a woven wire fence, a high tensile fence, a wooden fence separating one male from another, usually doesn't cut it. We have seen instances where males have killed each other through a fence by ramming each other. So just something that you want to keep in mind. The last thing that I want to talk about that I want you to consider, the kind of side note that I want you to consider, is the amount of aggression between humans and these animals. Again, it's not a dog, it's not a cat, it's not a pet. The more you handle it, it's not going to get more gentle. And you need to remember that. I've seen lots of videos on YouTube which condone, they say, oh, well, if they're aggressive to you, you need to be aggressive to them, and you need to show them who's boss. Flipping goats, flipping rams, grabbing them by the feet and flipping them over, you're not doing anything. You're teaching them to be more violent, if anything, and you're not going to get good results from that. Scaring an animal to be afraid of you, to show you respect, does not work. The only thing you're going to do then is you're going to create kind of a lame animal. That is to say that they're going to be nice to your face, and then when you go into the pen with them and you turn your back on them for a second, they're going to attack you, and then you're going to pay for it. You're going to get hit from behind. You're going to get hit in the back of the leg, hit in the knees. It is not worth it. The other thing that I saw recently was a gentleman said, well, just put a bucket over their head. Like, that was his answer. Like, oh, I've got this really aggressive animal, and he lives in my pasture, and so he's so mean I can't handle him or be around him, so I just put a 5-gallon bucket over his head, and then by the time he figures out how to get it off, I'm away from him. And again, that's not the answer. The answer is we want to prevent them from getting this way in the first place. If you've got an animal that you've got to throw around, if you've got an animal that the only way you can deal with them is by putting a bucket on his head, chances are you need to hit the reset button, and you need to figure out what's going on, because neither one of those are acceptable answers when it comes to raising livestock. I know that our channel doesn't always tell you what you want to hear, but what we're attempting to do is we're attempting to teach you the right thing to do in the right way. And we've made these mistakes too. So a lot of where this is coming from is from things that we've done wrong, and lessons that we've learned. And we're just trying to pass that on to you. So I hope that makes sense. And we're going to talk a little bit about things that you can do, hoods that you can wear, things like that, to help protect animals and protect property. So that's it. That's all we've got for today. I appreciate you watching our videos. For those of you that have entered for recent drawings, we have sent out emails to the winners of our drawings. So please consider liking and giving the thumbs up. We really do appreciate it. I'm Tim from Lanessa Farm Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you next time.